The eGMP platform developed by Kia, Hyundai, Genesis is probably, hands down, the most versatile and, frankly, the best electric vehicle platform on the market today.
We have driven a bunch of different vehicles based on that platform. Some from the Genesis brand, the Genesi, I suppose, as the group for them. We've also driven the Kia EV6 GT. And obviously the Ioniq 5.
And the Ioniq 5 was a very retro-themed car. It reminded us both, especially with the blocky stylings, of a 1980s hot hatch that had just been embiggenated somehow. Like a Renault 5 that had been working out. Blocky headlights, blocky tail lights, very retro-themed. And, well, the eGMP platform gets to be retro once more with this, the Hyundai Ioniq 6. It is, frankly, like it's straight out of the 1990s, but in a good way.
Yeah, so hop in the back, kids. We're going to take you to Chuck E. Cheese.
Lost track of how many eGMP platform cars we've had a chance to drive, but I think this is probably the most unique.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have the orb.
True, but it does have lights here.
I know, and they do fun things when you change the drive mode.
Right, exactly. So if I press the button here, I'm currently in normal, right? If I change to sport, they go red and then they go back to white. And if I go to eco, they kind of go green and then they go back to white. And of course, because this is an eGMP platform car, it's got some very nice functionality. Even though this particular variant is all-wheel drive, if you want the longest range, you have to go with the rear-wheel drive. But this is the range-topping one, so it's all-wheel drive. And it turns off one of the motors when you are in eco mode.
Yeah. Unless, I think, if you absolutely floor it, then it will turn that motor back on.
To give you that extra power.
But, yeah, the rest of the time it's kind of disconnected and not doing anything, and you do get back a lot of the efficiency that you would have if you'd have bought the rear-wheel drive.
The biggest complaint that I have about this is, while the driving experience is very much like all of the other eGMP platform cars, I mean, it can make good progress when you want it to. It doesn't always feel like the front motor is doing a whole lot, and that is because it's like a 1/3, 2/3 split in terms of power.
Yeah, it definitely feels more like a rear-wheel drive car.
So there's definitely a lot of rear-wheel drive bias, and in the wet, I have noticed that. But in general, the road handling of this is really good. The steering is direct, and I know we said in the introduction that this is like a 90s car, and I hope it's pretty obvious now why we said it was a 90s car. But the A-pillar is one of the smallest A-pillars I've seen on a production car in a really long time, and I would love to know how they made it so small.
I mean, I guess it's just a lot of complex shapes, because you need the strength there. But also, the other thing is, this is basically, I mean, it is a sedan. It's much smaller. You don't have those big, tall sheets of glass that you get on SUVs.
Right, and it even has a normal sunroof.
And so you can afford to have a little bit less strength in this pillar because you don't have to support all of that floppy weight up above.
And it does feel very well glued to the ground. From the driver's perspective looking forwards, it also reminds me very much of the Model 3 at the front end. It doesn't have quite as many bulbous bits that you would see from Model 3. But overall, the driving experience reminds me of a more refined Model 3 in a lot of ways.
I think what you have there is that Hyundai are not an old manufacturer by any means, but they've been building cars for a while and they have some of that suspension setup, tuning knowledge that at the end of the day, Tesla just haven't quite got yet.
I can already hear keyboard warriors being very angry with us in the comments. But in terms of how this cross-shops, this does hit very hard right into the Model 3 territory, especially at the low end.
It absolutely does. I mean, that's really where it's targeted. It's targeted pretty much at the same people. It's targeted at people who are happy with a sedan, because this is a sedan, and it really speaks to the bits of Tesla's kind of finesse that they just haven't quite got yet. And Tesla, look, a Model 3 is not a bad car. It's a perfectly good car, but in terms of driver experience, it's not a real driver's car. And this, I think, is a little closer.
And it's a little bit more conventional in terms of its layout as well. I've heard lots of people complain about the fact that cars like Tesla, and Tesla's not the only company to do this, right? Everything is software driven on screen. There's actually buttons here. There are controls and buttons here, and you've got a proper dash. You've got that lovely blind spot camera thing that works really well and allows you to see exactly what's going on. The turning circle is tight and responsive, even with the all-wheel drive train setup. The steering is a little bit light for my tastes, personally. I would like to feel a little bit more weight in the steering feedback, but I know that it's much more preferred in Asia to have a lighter steering feedback.
Yeah, I would like a little bit more feedback there, but that's, I think, a complaint that we've had for every EGMP car except for possibly the EV6 GT.
And the EV6 GT was designed to be more of a sporty driver's car, and so it has more of a dialed-in feedback. And you felt a little bit more connected to the road. We're driving at like 46, 50 miles an hour right now. The cabin interior is not super quiet, but we're able to have a really pleasant conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's not up at the level of the Mercedes we had last week, obviously, but I know that Hyundai Kia as a group do a lot of work on minimizing noise through the materials in the vehicle, so not putting so much weight in as you get in traditional vehicles by just slapping lots of soundproofing on things. So a lot more in specific noise absorption characteristics of things like the seat foam, which is an interesting way to do it. And I think it works pretty well, but you definitely do get a little bit more road noise than maybe I would really prefer. But then you have to think about the price when you say that.
And we'll talk price later on in the video, but this car has been built with cost-cutting measures in mind, I think. So this center console area here has got the window switches. They're not in the door, they're here, which means that you can operate my window and vice versa. We can't do it right now because we've got a camera on there, but it means that from a production standpoint, you don't have to have as many wires entering into the door, which I suspect saves money in the long run. And instead of having multiple cable runs, you've just got one cable run to one set of switches, which again cuts down on switch numbers within the car. The frustrating thing here, though, is that the rear seat passengers, they do still have their window switches on their doors, but in the front, the only thing you have kind of connected to the door is the driver's two-way memory seat selector here, and of course also the mirrors. The mirror controls, though, they're right here on the actual, I suppose the
under dash
area. Yeah.
I think one of the other advantages that they've gained from doing this is that this is, I mean, it's quite a narrow floating console in the middle, but they've also used that space in the door really well, because they've given you a bit of extra cutout right along the side here, and it does mean that you can spread your legs should you wish to.
Spread your legs, and also my arm is at the perfect height. This is the perfect armrest position for me, which is unusual. Normally I find they're too high or too low, but this one is just perfect, and this one is just perfect. But just like all of the other eGMP platform cars, there's no wireless CarPlay or Android Auto.
I know, it's becoming a bit of a running joke now that you get in one of these vehicles with the shiny touchscreen and the wireless charging, and then you have to connect a cable because Kia, Hyundai, Genesis, whatever their supplier is for that head unit, they do not do wireless CarPlay or wireless Android Auto.
Yet.
Oh yes, I mean, every car, they've promised that it is coming with an OTA update.
But it just hasn't happened yet. eGMP is known for its flexible charging capability, right? So it has 800 volt fast charging, and that's true on all of the eGMP platform cars, and that means if you get to a charging station that is capable of 350 kilowatts, you can charge this vehicle up incredibly quickly. A cool thing about this particular model is that it has the battery preconditioning. You can actually set it to precondition the battery so that when you arrive, your battery is nice and warm, because a warmer battery is going to be able to accept charge more readily, and therefore you're going to be able to recharge more quickly. But one of the things that I hadn't realised until I looked at the spec sheet for this car is you would assume that the two different battery pack options for this vehicle would actually be reasonably cross-compatible. So you can get a standard range battery pack, which is 53 kilowatt hours, or you can get the 77 kilowatt hour battery pack. I think it's like 77.4 kilowatt hours. And that battery pack is what you get in the extended range variants. It turns out that both battery packs have different voltages. So the standard range is only 480 volts, while the extended range is like 697 volts.
Yeah.
But they are both capable of charging at, 350 kilowatts. So the recharge time is 18 minutes for both battery packs from 0 to 80% state of charge.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the real strengths of the eGMP platform, is that, quite frankly, it puts a lot of other automakers to shame on their charging experience.
Right. And also kudos to Hyundai for actually making the different charge rates available in its spec sheet. So the standard range rear-wheel drive is 5 hours and 20 minutes on a level 2 charging station. This one is 6 hours and 50 minutes, I think, for a full charge on a level 2 charging station. But in addition to the 800 volt or 350 kilowatt charging rate, they also tell you that this will charge in about 73 minutes at a 50 kilowatt charging station.
Yeah, so even if you hit one that's derated on Electrify America, you'll actually still get charged.
Just over an hour to 80%.
Yeah.
It's about 58 minutes if you're using the standard range, the smaller 53 kilowatt hour battery pack. So I think that's very, very interesting. In addition to the differences between the battery packs, there's also some pretty incredible differences between the powertrain options. So if you go for the rear-wheel drive standard range, you only get 111 kilowatts from the motor, rear-wheel drive motor, 111 kilowatts, which is 149 horsepower. If you change that to the all-wheel drive extended range battery, you get a lot more power. So you get over 200 kilowatts from combined. It's like 200 and trying to do the maths here, 222 kilowatts if memory serves, 320 horsepower.
Yeah, this isn't like the busy forks where you go to the all-wheel drive and you're like, what's the difference?
Right, this is a noticeable difference. Also, interestingly, if you go for the extended range rear-wheel drive, you get an additional like 50 kilowatts of power. So you have 168 kilowatts if you have the rear-wheel drive extended range, which is 225 horsepower. And that's the one you want to get if you want the 361 mile EPA range, which is 580 kilometers.
And I think we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I think it's really important to note that the car that we have is spec'd with the 20-inch shiny alloy wheels.
Right.
And not the 18-inch that come on the lower trim variants.
Right, because most people reviewing cars want to review the top spec trim, and most automakers want you to review the top spec trim because it's the top spec trim that comes with all the bells and whistles that get people in the door.
But
we actually prefer to review the mid or even sometimes the entry-level version.
Yeah, and in this case in particular, those 20-inch wheels are absolute range killers.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And this is the extended range vehicle, and yet we're getting less range out of this than we are from my 5-year-old Nero EV. I find that unfortunate.
We really need to highlight with those, lovely 1990s fluorescent marker pens. I know you still have a set of those.
I do.
The fact that this is a sedan rather than an SUV. Personally, I am a fan of hatchbacks because hatchbacks are super, super versatile. I am not a fan of SUVs, and if I'm given the choice between an SUV or a sedan, I'm starting to feel that I would go with this. If someone said, do you want the hatchback SUV or do you want the sedan version? This feels a lot more cozy. It feels a lot better put together than the Ioniq 5 in a lot of ways. It feels like it knows what it is better than the Ioniq 5.
I think I'm super grateful that it isn't an SUV. For me, a sedan it doesn't really work for the way that I live because I do a lot of DIY and I have effectively one vehicle. Like my wife and I have a car each, but at the end of the day they both fulfill the same purpose, which is we like to put big things in the back of them, and you can't. The trunk space on this is very much I'm taking my suitcases away for the weekend kind of car.
But the reality is that a lot of people don't need the hatchback.
No, a lot of people don't. A lot of people have no need of all that space. And in the US in particular, the sedan is a really popular format that's kind of disappeared from the marketplace. And this is one of the very few options that exists in that marketplace for people who want a vehicle that isn't an SUV.
We've joined the freeway so we can do a little bit of talking about this car's real strengths on the freeway. And just like many people don't need the hatchback experience, a lot of people who buy this, they're going to be living in a suburban setting. They're going to spend a lot of time on the freeway, and Hyundai really goes to great lengths to make that a really comfortable and enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I mean, Hyundai's driver assistance package, which is I think called Highway Driver Assist or Highway Driving Assist, it's a solid package. It's not one of those super exciting all bells and whistles full self-driving things, but it has a very good lane keep assist. It doesn't ping pong too much. It also has its own lane change capability, which I'm just cancelling because I'm actually wanting to pull off onto a separate lane, not change lane. But it's quite subtle. It doesn't really enforce a lot of harsh kind of cornering. It doesn't pull you very hard to one side or the other. It just kind of says, this is roughly where you should be in the lane and I'm going to help you stay there.
And it's very forgiving with its driver assistance technologies as well. I've always been a fan of the cameras on the rear view mirrors that pop up on the driver pod whenever you put your indicator on. It gives you a great blind spot check, and it allows you to make sure that there's nobody there and that you can safely execute a move. So one thing that you pointed out to me, which I think is hilarious, is you can do a whole load of different things here. While you're driving, you can, go to the climate screen and it's a couple of button pushes away. It's a nice setting. You've got the driver only setting here, but you can do all of this, but you cannot set the driver's seat while you're driving.
Yes, you press the memory button. No.
It doesn't let you do anything, but you can press any of these buttons for as long as you want and it just lets you get away with it, which is a bit questionable, although I would hope that you're going to be doing it as the passenger rather than as the driver. The other thing I think that's really worth noting is you have a quiet mode that allows you to make sure that the radio doesn't disturb your rear seat passengers. While I don't think this is necessarily a family car, because I don't think very many people buy sedans as family cars anymore, I think it would be great if you were an aunt or an uncle to some kids and you have them for the weekend, you put them in the back seat and you've got the quiet mode on.
Yeah, so they can have a little sleep on the way wherever you're going.
And there's enough soundproofing in this vehicle that makes that experience really nice. And because there's a lot of rear seat room, you could actually fit a lot of paraphernalia back there for the kids once you've got them in their seats. This car is a car that I remember getting a little bit frustrated about when they did the launch event, because they portrayed this as the influencer's car with the onboard power and you could do all the cool things with it. And they came up with this really bizarre social media campaign talking about how the car was going to be used by all the influencers.
Yeah, and it had that whole digital launch with people coding their virtual reality experiences while sat in the car, which I mean is a very modern capitalist thing, that you're going to live in the car, but maybe not the way you want to portray it.
The fun thing about this though, I didn't get why they did it after experiencing the inside of the car, because this doesn't feel like a high-tech digital place.
No, it actually feels kind of retro inside.
I mean, I really would have liked to have seen a cassette player.
Yeah.
And maybe a dial-up modem for my over-the-air software updates. That is how retro this thing feels. The cars that people were driving in the 1990s, the late 1990s, a bit shagged, think Saturns or other fairly cheap vehicles that had been around the block a few times by the time you got behind the wheel. They had the electric window system in the middle of the center console. Maybe it wasn't the budget version with the wind down windows. It was the higher tech version, but it was a little tired.
This is the aspiration of those vehicles. This is what they could have been had the technology been there.
I mean, it reminds me in some ways of the EV1.
Yeah, that was actually the first time I got in it. For once, we managed to not share thoughts beforehand, apart from about the key. But I got in it and I literally opened the door. I didn't even actually get in, and I was like, it's like a modern EV1.
Yeah.
And it really, I mean, the interior does kind of feel a little bit like they discovered grey and plastic simultaneously and got very overexcited.
But it fits the narrative.
It does.
And it's so nice to have an EV that is not like every other EV on the market. The technology behind this car is not shoved in your face. It's not right there. It's a distance away. You've got the dual display, but it's not to the point that is all you see when you sit in the car. It's got a nice airy feel inside the cabin, plenty of legroom, plenty of rear space as well.
A lot of rear seat space.
I would have liked to have had more headroom.
Yeah, the design, the kind of coupe stylings of it, that does take away a little bit of the headroom at the back.
The other car this reminds me of is the Citroën DS. It's that kind of aerodynamic. I mean, the DS was way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
This feels like it could save someone's life. You know, it's got that same kind of unassuming vibe that the DS had in a lot of ways. It's got that same very simple steering wheel. Granted, you've got buttons on the steering wheel and you've got paddle shifters and all of that, but it's unassuming. The Ioniq 5 was like 80s retro feel, and this is 90s retro feel.
Yeah, it definitely hits that spot of the rose-tinted glasses on the 90s, and I think it really hits its target market of maybe late Gen Xers, but really millennials.
And I am a late Gen Xer. I am a full year and a bit younger than you.
Yeah, wee Ben.
Yeah, exactly, wee Ben. I like it. She calls me young, even though we're not that far apart in age. But it's definitely got that. Can you remember, if you can remember the early days of dial-up internet, if you're familiar with the horrible "you've got mail" message that you used to get, if you know how to load a VCR and you know that a CD is not just a frisbee, this is probably the car for you. But I think there's one other thing that we have to really talk about before we wrap up, and that is the key. First of all, it's so lightweight and cheap, and this feels like something from the 90s. Although it may also remind people of other things.
I mean, I get good vibes from that key.
Yes, indeed. And you're not talking about the song, are you? No. Well, look. And it's got all of the normal things, right? So you can do the forwards and backwards because it's the EGMP platform. But I want this to be fluorescent. I want these buttons to be fluorescent,
like
glowing.
That, like greeny, glowy fluorescent?
Yeah, exactly. And then it would be complete. But I like the fact that the key matches the car. And I do wonder if Hyundai's missed something here. I feel they should be spraying the key to match the car, which would be the ultimate in style. Which brings me to the final thing, price. This is a very good price for the entry-level Ioniq 6. Unfortunately though, this is the range-topping Limited with all-wheel drive, extended range and massive, ridiculous 20-inch wheels, which absolutely kills the range.
Yeah, I mean, it is bizarre that automakers, in general, they give us the shiniest, sexiest version of their car, which I kind of understand, but in this case, it's really hurt because the 20-inch wheels completely destroy the range of this vehicle.
It's supposed to have 270 miles. I've not seen more than about 220, 230. You said you've seen less than that.
Yeah, well, driving it down today, it's going to get maybe 200, maybe if we baby it the rest of the day. And that is not me hooning down the freeway. That is me sticking to the speed limit.
Whereas
in comparison,
yeah.
I know the Nero is smaller, but I can do that same journey and get 240 out of it in this weather.
Your Nero regularly gets higher efficiency than I've seen out of this car every single day of the week. But if the range estimates are to be believed, this car has an EPA rated range of 270, we've not seen it. The long range rear wheel drive variant of this is well over 300 miles.
Yeah.
But the standard range rear wheel drive version of this supposedly gets 240 miles per charge on more sensible rims. If it actually does anywhere near that, 800 volt fast charging, super quick to refuel. V to L, very good way of being able to run emergency devices in a power cut. That's great. And it's very spacious and very easy to drive. The price is now under $40,000. I think it's $37,500 before incentives and before any mandatory delivery fees. That is incredibly good value for money. And I think if you are in the market for something in that price range, you owe it to yourself to try this car.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing lists of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of the more than 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube. They cover our bills, pay our team, and make sure that we as a channel can remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just go ahead and follow the links below. There's a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay every year, just under $11. A huge welcome to our newest supporters. They are Patreon user 1124, Gordon Smith, Alan Williams, Tim Nicholas, Jalia Hallett, and Nathan Plowman. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have a good old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at. The address is linked to below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store in the down below as well. We've got some great content coming up, so make sure you're subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube. Again, links below, and we hope to see you again soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you will enjoy this video, but we here at the channel also think that this one is well worth a look. Thanks for watching, see you soon, and as always, keep evolving!